can only be attributable to human error.
You're entering Paranormal.
Where will we go next? Just phantom from another time.
No one, Mr. Muller.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
That is one big pile of shit.
Hello, I'm Alex Daikaiju.
I'm Jasmine with
And I'm Eli Watson.
And we are
Cryptid
Campfire.
Woohoo!
Hello,
Yes.
everyone.
Hello. We are starting a new tome. We are kind of returning to form a little bit with how we're going to end this episode. You'll see later what our plan is. But we're back to talking about cryptids. You know, last week we did sort of a look back on the year of 2021 and a look ahead at what's coming for 2022. But we are back to talking about cryptids today, and we are headed to Florida.
Yeah. It could be said that Florida is a crazy state. Now, crazy doesn't always mean bad. Crazy comes in many different flavors. Florida itself was named by Juan Ponce de Leon in 1513 when he landed on the shores and looked at the lush and green terrain. It's the known home of Walt Disney World and Miami Beach. Florida has also been known for rampant vice in the 80s and full-on zombie drugs several years ago.
Oh, God.
But there's a homegrown charm to the Sunshine State, buried down between the nightclubs and the rocket ships, the Miami Dolphins and the alligators, retirement homes, swamps, and gift shops. We find a little homegrown charm that is Island Boys.
Oh, no.
Just kidding. We're talking about the skunk ape today, that lovable scamp.
We are. So, you know, the skunk ape is sort of Florida's version of Bigfoot. The area that we're going to be talking about specifically today is going to be the Everglades. Now, the Everglades are a natural region of tropical wetlands in the southern portion of Florida, mostly underwater and covered with tall grass. Even more specifically, according to Dave Shealy, who's the leader of the Skunk Ape Research Headquarters in Ochapee, Florida, and someone we'll be talking about quite a bit today, he says that Big Cypress is the number one hotspot. And Big Cypress is a 790,000 acre preserve abutting Everglades National Park, which encompasses 1.5 million acres. And so that is the largest swath of protected land east of the Mississippi, most of it rarely explored. So Sheeley argues that it's possible that all kinds of reclusive creatures could live deep within the thousands of acres of swamps, cypress knees, and alligator holes without ever being seen.
I think a slight correction to what you said is I think it's in combination Big Cypress National Park and Everglades National Park together because they touch is the biggest. It's 2.2 million acres of natural reserve, like untouched. People don't live there. East of the Mississippi.
Is that not what I said?
I think you just said Big Cypress, but I
Big
think
Cypress is 790,000 acres, which abuts Everglades National Park, which encompasses 1.5 million acres. So 1.5 million acres, Everglades National Park, additional 790,000 acres, Big Cypress.
Hey, that adds up.
Yeah.
Just saying.
It's a lot of
Sometimes
numbers.
you gotta check people's math sometimes, you know.
Anyway, did you guys have any more information on the Everglades or Florida or Big Cypress that you wanted to share before we move on to the description of the skunk ape?
There's gators there.
There are lots of gators. And you know what? I've got a little beef with Florida because I was there recently in October. I was there for about 3 days, and all I wanted to do was see a gator out in the wild, and I didn't.
Did you go out in the wild?
I mean, I didn't go out into the swamps or anything like that.
Yeah,
but
where'd you go?
I drove through many streets, past many rivers and little lakes and ponds and mini swamps and things like that, but no gators. The only gator I saw was a baby gator at the Orlando Science Center.
Well,
That's a win there.
I'll say this. From my time in Louisiana, so I haven't been to the Everglades yet, but from the time in Louisiana, the gators were master hiders.
Mm.
They like to do the whole, they poke up so that it's only their eyes and their nose is above the water, and they just sit perfectly still. So you could be like I really don't think driving past something is optimal experience, because you'd probably just think it's a rock, or maybe even just a little bit of like a plant or something sticking out of the water, and you never know. It was a gator. It was there.
Let me take this opportunity to thank y'all for watching Cryptid Campfire, and ask that if you enjoy our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now. Like this video and click on the bell so you can be notified each time a new video goes up. And now, back to the show.
Well, Alex did give us quite a great introduction to the state of Florida when we first opened up. I don't think either me or Eli was expecting that, but that was beautiful, Alex.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was good.
So when we talk about the skunk ape, it is unclear who actually coined the name skunk ape, but it's not anything super crazy or hard. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's an ape-like creature that stinks.
Yeah.
The unusual odor, some have likened to the smell of rotting garbage, methane, or obviously skunks. And quick side note, we did briefly talk about the skunk ape before in our Bigfoot mountain tome a couple years ago. We did an episode on different types of Sasquatch, so like different regional sort of Sasquatch, bat squatch, things like that. And we did briefly talk about the skunk ape for I think like 15 minutes or so. And we had talked about how people have described it as smelling like a wet dog that had been caught in the rain, and different things like that. And some researchers attribute the odor to the natural habitat of alligator dens being filled with swamp gas and animal cadavers and things like that, while others think the skunk ape stinks just because it doesn't bathe.
Yeah.
Yes and no.
Totally.
I don't know.
Totally valid.
Quick note on the name though. So on paper, I believe, because I got caught up, apparently you just briefly mentioned there's some controversy on where the name comes from, and
Yeah.
there, like, people are beefing over like who came up with the phrase skunk ape. And
Is Dave Shealy one of those people?
Yes, and Lauren Coleman as well. And Lauren Coleman says that the first written usage of the name skunk ape is from 1971. We'll get into this later, but Dave Shealy says he heard the name skunk ape from his father in 1973.
But his father was the one who said that's not true. So
but and there's a documentary out there where Dave Shealy claims that his father is the one who coined the name skunk ape. And when Lauren Coleman emailed him about that in the early 2000s, Dave Shealy said that, one, it wasn't his idea to include that in the documentary, even though he was the one who said it. And then two, that he could not say for certain whether his father did not come up with the name skunk ape.
Yeah, it's unclear, like I said, but we'll be talking about Shealy a lot today, and probably talking about the validity of his claims as we go on as well. But he is sort of the main source of information for a lot of skunk ape research. As we mentioned, he's the head of the skunk ape research headquarters over there in Ochapee, Florida. So a lot of the information today does come directly from him, such as his description of an average male skunk ape, which is standing between 7 and 8 feet tall, which that changes too. Sometimes it's 7, sometimes it's 8, sometimes it's 9, sometimes it's somewhere in between, but generally taller than a human man, weighing roughly 450 pounds, whereas the females are smaller, 5 to 6 feet tall, only 250 pounds, but both are covered in long reddish or black hair, similar to an orangutan or a gorilla, and they stand upright on 2 legs. Am I missing anything?
The other
Uh,
kind of skunk ape.
The other kind of skunk ape.
I'm not even kidding.
Is it
Not
the
kidding.
mega skunk ape?
No,
The
it's the
9-foot
smaller
one?
skunk ape. No, this is the other one, which there really is. It looks like there really is two different things happening in Florida. There's a more chimpanzee like skunk ape that goes
Mm.
on all fours, and instead of the typical kind of 7 to 8 foot tall, more Sasquatch like creature, including footprints that have been found that include, I'm going to use the scientific term, the hallux, which is the big toe, goes off to the side instead of in a line, like basically more like a chimpanzee or the other great apes, to where their foot looks like a hand, is essentially what I'm saying. And there's been tracks like that have been found, as well as knuckle prints, eyewitness reports of them going on all fours, but not being 7 to 8 feet tall, being closer to 5 feet tall.
Well,
And
that's the females. I'm just kidding. Who knows?
who knows? And we'll get into, I have a couple of like different historical reports that you're just like, what is happening here?
When you were talking about the footprints earlier, how many toes typically? Because I read 4. Is that accurate with the toe that goes out to the side?
I think that's a misunderstanding. The 4-toed tracks, because Dave Shealy has 4-toed tracks,
Right.
but he also has 5-toed tracks with the thumb off to the side. And so he believes that the tracks that he got with 4 toes, the 5th toe just didn't register
Gotcha.
in the ground, which happens sometimes.
I do just want to say real quick, it's funny you brought it to our attention, Eli, that there's a big beef over who came up with the name skunk ape, which is pretty funny in and of itself because it's just 2 words put together.
Yeah.
It's not like they invented the Latin term for skunk ape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other names out there aren't as exciting either. It's also known as the swamp ape. 2 more words put together. Or my favorite, the Florida Bigfoot. Is when you just say, well, it's the California Bigfoot, it's the Florida Bigfoot. The Yeti is just the Himalayan Bigfoot.
Another quick note about Florida, I think will be interesting, because I don't know, I feel like we've kind of barreled into this episode already, but Florida is not the typical place where you would expect to find a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, you know?
That's the kind of crazy thing about it, right?
Right. That's just like, what? There's Bigfoot in Florida? You know, it's we usually associate the Pacific Northwest. But according to the BFRO, the Bigfoot Researchers Organization, which takes reports and shares some online, the BFRO has over 333 sighting reports from Florida, which places it 3rd in the country after Washington and California.
Whoa.
Yeah, right? So you're like, whoa.
Yeah. Going back to some of the names for the skunk ape, did you guys come across the term Shawanoki? No?
Don't know if I came across that one. I came across a few different names, but they could have been misattribution, they say.
Interesting that neither of you came across it, because I came across it a couple of times and I found some interesting things about it. So there are claims that one of the names that Florida's Native Americans have for the skunk ape is the Shawanoki. And I looked that term up, and one of the things I came across was a Peter Byrne documentary from 1998 called Shawanoki, The Mystery of the Swamp Apes. But it doesn't...
Wait, this is the Peter Byrne?
Yeah, I believe so. There's only one Peter Byrne I know of. He had a 1998 documentary called Shawanoki, The Mystery of the Swamp Apes, but it's not really available anywhere in full. All I could find was a 3-minute segment uploaded to YouTube by one of the people involved, Andreas Wallach, who was the cinematographer and editor for the project. So Just 2 months ago, Andreas was responding to some comments under the video and stated that the name Shawanoki for the mythical Florida swamp ape was revealed to us by an elder lady of Florida's Miccosukee tribe, originally part of the Creek Nation. Pronunciation or spelling similarities with words of the Shawnee language are incidental. So, with a lot of the episodes that we do, there's always things like, oh, well, this Native American tribe called it this and had this legend and whatever. And sometimes it doesn't really go into full detail. It's always just general blanket statements about how, oh, the so and so tribe called it this hundreds of years ago. So I did a little digging on the term, and I actually found some additional, perhaps updated information listed on bigfootencounters.com related to the term Shawanoki. So it was originally assigned to Florida's ancient Native American Miccosukee branch language. It's a 400-year-old term of the Creek Seminole Indians, thought previously to roughly translate to swamp thing. But it actually literally translates to that which has snapping jaws, such as turtles, alligators, and crocodiles. So the early Seminoles held these creatures with great respect and carved totems to them. In 1997, there was a Creek Indian woman named Ellen Blackdog who wrote to say that the snapping mouth was in abundance in ancient times and it was greatly feared by her people. She had also written, this is where there might be some overlap. She had also written that there was a transient race of giants that came here from the Northern Territories, but my people are few now, and oral history of the giant in our language isn't to be found. I recall hearing my grandmother say the tall man or stone man plundered and pillaged our little settlement of its catch of its fish hanging out to dry, and the giant whistled during the night, but that was a long time ago. So it sounds to me like there are some people who say, oh no, the Shawanoki term does relate to the skunk ape, as Andreas said in his comments when they were making that Shawanoki documentary. But then there's other people who are like, no, we're talking about turtles and alligators, yo. So I couldn't find any really other specific details about the skunk ape Indian legends, only general statements, like I said, about the oral traditions of the Miccosukee and blanket claims that the skunk ape sightings reach back hundreds of years. But I did also find a statement that says the current Miccosukee Indian tribe, who offer tourist trips around the Everglades, believe that the skunk ape should be left in peace if it does exist.
That's really interesting.
Well, I was just gonna, this doesn't really relate. Well, it kind of does. This is more of a general statement about sort of Native American legends and when they come into play with cryptid and cryptozoology stuff. Matt Marino, he's an archaeologist and cultural resource specialist. He wrote an article in 2019 stating that the skunk ape is a complex tangle of Native American legend and non-Indigenous experience. But a problem of two ontological origins cannot be solved by applying the logic of just one. From a Western scientific perspective, the way in which we discuss Sasquatch legends, myths, and stories of different cultures may inherently flaw our analysis of their cultural significance. The concept of Sasquatch hails from lands that were/are inhabited by cultures that do not see meaningful distinctions between real and mythical or natural and supernatural. Perhaps then the greatest hurdle in the skunk ape debate is not one that forces us to find a smoking gun that proves that a skunk ape frolicked through your yard one night, but in fact encourages us to reckon with the idea that non-Western ontologies, the ones which gifted us with these myths and legends in the first place, are fundamentally different than our own, such that the idea of the Sasquatch will never be proven or disproven by Western scientific terms. And this is how they end this article. Perhaps, fellow Florida-based squatchers, what we need to realize is that while the skunk ape may not live out there, it lives in here. Yes, I'm pointing to my heart.
Wow. I have a lot of things to say about that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Number one being the hubris that people forget that our ancestors had to fight giants all the time.
Well, what he touches on in there, or what the person touches on who wrote that article, is something I have discussed on the podcast before, to where it seems to be like Western scientific minded idea that there is physical, like things can only be one thing, right?
Mhm.
To whereas other cultures, like Native American culture, to where things can be both physical and metaphysical at the same time. Case in point, you take coyote as being the trickster, or the fox being a trickster, things like that. We've talked about certain things like that on the show before. But I'm no expert in Native American mythology.
Yeah.
But I'm a little hard pressed on them talking about things that literally just aren't there. Like show me that. Like, you could maybe even make the point, oh, thunderbirds aren't real, but like thunderbirds you could say are based on eagles. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
And then to go so far as to say, like that the Native American culture doesn't make a meaningful distinction between what's real and what's not real. Therefore, the skunk ape doesn't exist out there. It only exists in their minds. I feel like
It's a bold statement.
It's a very bold statement.
And I wasn't saying that what they said was right or wrong. I was simply reading what they wrote.
Sure. I think they're full of it, but
yeah, there's two types of people in this world. Someone will tell you a story of their ancestors and how they dealt with hairy giants and the struggles and all this history, and the one person will say, wow, that is a crazy story. I gotta know more. I want to know more history. I want to know more culture. And then the other person will say, sounds kind of lame. I don't see any around. You got the goofy.
Like, I could see that argument more applying to like Australia Dreamtime stuff, because from what I understand, the native Aborigines, even they have a hard time distinguishing, like, well, we don't really know what this means, like, but I don't know. And then the other tidbit that I kind of wanted to share earlier, the fact that Peter Burns' involvement in any way, shape, or form with the skunk ape is surprising to me, because I had the pleasure of talking to Peter Byrne, I think, a year or two ago.
Oh, really?
And I have it from his mouth that he believes that there are no credible reports of Sasquatch east of the Rockies. So in Peter Byrne's mind, the skunk ape is not real.
Well, like I said, I wasn't able to watch the full documentary. I only saw a 3-minute segment. So it's very possible that in that documentary he made that same claim, but I haven't.
What did you say? Was it a PBS documentary, or did you say?
I don't know who like aired it or anything like that. I just know that it's from 1998 and it's called Shawanoki, The Mystery of the Swamp Apes.
Yeah, I was just curious, like he may not believe it, but when PBS comes with that money to shoot a documentary, I'll shoot a documentary about the skunk ape, sure.
Yeah, Peter Byrne strikes me as that type of person.
He's really old now, isn't he? Isn't he in like his 90s?
He is in his 90s. I think he was 95 years old when I talked to him.
Whoa.
And he's still around. He's still kicking. So,
well, let's get into some sightings then. If we're ready to move on to that, let's get into some tangible experiences.
Okay. Some of the earliest ones I got. Should we start there from the beginning of time?
Yeah. The Big Bang.
I mean, before we get into that, I'll just say as sort of like a blanket statement, there's multiple skunk ape sightings throughout all of the counties. Palm Beach, Hernando, Pasco, Monroe, Collier counties, they all have stuff going on. And there's even stuff that happens in other states, which you could argue that that's not the skunk ape because that's not in Florida, but there's stuff reported in South Carolina and Georgia and Arkansas and things like that. But specifically today, we're focusing on Florida encounters.
So this comes, a good chunk of my research today comes from Lyle Blackburn's Beyond Boggy Creek in Search of the Southern Bigfoot.
Okay.
because I'll be honest, guys, I had a really hard time finding like any sort of cohesive information on
Did you?
the skunk ape. I did. I was like, I don't know where to look.
Okay.
And I was searching my library and I couldn't really find anything. But then I was like, well, Lyle Blackburn, he's kind of the Southern Bigfoot guy. So I looked in his book and he's got a whole chapter on Florida and it's pretty good. The problem is it's really short because he covers multiple, like Jasmine just said, a lot of the states that you just mentioned are chapters in the same book. And for sake of simplicity, I think we all just focused on Florida. So he was able to pull from the Apalachicola. Is that how you say it?
I have no idea.
The Apalachicola Gazette in 1884.
Oh.
A report of a wild man was captured over by Ochisi Pond. So, and it's pond in the East Coast sense of pond. By California standards, it's a lake. It's like 3 square miles, so not quite a pond.
Yeah, that's a big pond.
And it's got islands in it. So apparently the people living along the edge of the pond saw a hairy man eating berries and making howls in the night and swimming to and fro between the islands. And it wasn't aggressive. In fact, people who had stumbled upon it at close range discovered that it just turned and ran away. It was pretty skittish, but they were freaked out because of its human appearance. So they got a posse together and they caught him. And from the article, it really seems like they were concerned about, they thought it was a person who had escaped a mental asylum and was like running amok in the wilderness. And they were like, we need to get this guy back to where he belongs. And then they realized like it wasn't talking, whether it was capable of talking or just refused to talk. And it was completely covered in hair, like more than anybody should be. And it was also naked. They were like, what is this thing? And then the article ends. So we don't know what happened.
You know, I think it's interesting that you say you didn't really know like where to look for skunk ape sightings and research, because we did just talk about how there's so many. Like there's like 300 listed on the BFRO's website.
Yeah, there is. But
this is, I feel like, is one of those subjects that you could just talk about endless sightings. So like a lot of the sightings that I have to talk about today, some of them are like 1 or 2 sentences, and I wish there would have been more information, because the one that you just shared is definitely earlier than anything I found. The earliest I found happened in 1942. It was in Shawanoki County, east of Tallahassee, when a man said that one of the creatures hitched a ride on the running board of his car for nearly half a mile before jumping off and racing into the woods. Does that sound familiar to you?
No.
Okay.
But I have a similar sighting from the 60s.
Okay. Because like I read that and I was like, wow, I would love to know more. Like, what did that guy say? What's the details here? You're just giving me this one sentence?
Yeah. Where'd you pull that from? Is that from the BFRO?
No, that came from a West Palm Beach news website.
Yeah, Lyle Blackburn includes, there's some difficulty in trying to find skunk ape sightings like pre-1940 because they weren't like, and this is a thing, the term Bigfoot wasn't coined until the 1950s, same or the Sasquatch even. And so before that, they referred to these things as hairy men, wild men. But the problem is in Florida, they called them like rogue Native Americans or escaped, like the previous story I shared. It doesn't mention anything about a hairy man per se. They thought it was an escaped, asylum person. Right. Like, are you realistically going to go through every single Florida newspaper from the mid 1800s all the way up to 1940? Like,
yeah,
I don't think anyone's going to do that, So that's why it's just difficult. That's why most of the sighting reports we get are the historical ones are from 1940 and upward.
Alex, what was the earliest you found?
The only real sighting that I found that was interesting was Dave Shealy,
Okay.
because he claimed that he saw a skunk ape at the age of 10.
Yeah, we'll get there. Put a pause on that.
Put the
We'll
pin
put a
there.
in that. The next earliest sighting that I came across happened in 1957, which is again just kind of another 1 or 2 sentence explanation of something that supposedly happened when a skunk ape invaded the camp of a pair of hunters in Big Cypress National Preserve.
Oh, I have a little bit more info on that then.
Go for it.
Because Lauren Coleman was the one who kind of dug up this story, and I'm really struggling with the fact that Lauren Coleman doesn't have more details on this. But because I only have like 3 sentences on it, like 3 more sentences. So it's 1957. Several men out in Big Cypress. They're sleeping in hammocks, and they're awoken by footfalls. And so they grab their guns, get ready, turn their backs because they're in sort of a perimeter around their fire. So they set their backs to the fire and look out. And that's when they spot a silhouette of a man about 30 yards away. And then they realize, wait, that's way too big to be a person. And I have a quote here from Lyle Blackburn's book. After lingering among the cypress for approximately 2 minutes, the thing simply turned and walked away. As it did, the hunters could see that its head had a different shape, sort of a slump with what also seemed like a heavy chin. One of the men also noted eye shine. And I'll throw this bit of information. Humans don't have eye shine. So whatever it was, because eye shine's caused by another layer over the eye that we biologically do not have. So we can't you can't even fake it if you wanted to. You can't turn it on.
Turn on that eye shine.
So most of the modern skunk ape sightings grew more frequent in the 70s, as far as I understand, which was when developers in South Florida were pushing the suburban boundaries closer to the wilderness areas, like in the Everglades and Big Cypress. Did you have something else before the 70s that you wanted to share?
The 1960s.
Go for it.
Yes. I have 2 things from the 1960s. So John Keel it seems like everybody who's who is involved somehow with the skunk ape.
I know these names seem familiar.
Yeah. I mean, so far, what do we got? We got Peter Byrne, Lauren Coleman. Now we got John Keel getting in the mix. If you guys need a refresher, John Keel was the famous author of the Mothman prophecies. So even he had a little bit to say on the skunk ape thing. So he discusses a case of sightings that happened throughout 1966 and 1967, which, funny enough, is the same years as the Mothman sightings.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, I mean, that's probably true. I mean, that is true. I wouldn't have known that off the top of my head, but I do know that 1967 is also the year that the Patterson-Gimlin film came out.
Yeah. There's a lot happening.
What a year for cryptids. Yeah.
So this is southeast of Orlando in a place called Holopaw, in a case called the Holopaw Gorilla, because of it being on all fours. It's black, covered in black hair, 5 feet tall, but also bipedal, with the ability to walk bipedally for long periods of time. And that's basically what I got.
It is Holopaw. It's not Holopaw, but it's
Holopaw. The Holopaw Gorilla.
I'll tell you, there's a lot of interesting Florida names that came up in this research. I had to Google almost every single one of them and look up how to pronounce them, and Holopaw was one of them.
Holopaw. Yeah. I also have one more sighting from the 60s. So this comes from Lyle Blackburn's book. This involves a man named Ralph, aka Bud Chambers. He was walking in the woods along the Anclote River north of Tampa when he saw a giant hairy thing standing in the trees. That'll come up more too, them being in the trees. He stated that the thing had a rancid, putrid odor like stale urine. And so now I'm directly quoting. Alarmed but curious, Chambers quickly retrieved a friend and his dog. They were able to track the creature into a swamp, but at some point the dog refused to go any further. Chambers said he saw the creature again the following year when it came into his backyard. His dog dutifully attacked, but the creature simply walked off in the direction of the swamp, never to be seen again. And that was the late 60s.
At least the dog got out of that story okay.
Yeah, I think it survived. This is the big one that ties into something that Jasmine said earlier. This happened on November 30th, 1966, where a woman said she encountered a strange beast while changing a tire. So she said she was driving along a lonely stretch of road near Brooksville when she experienced a blowout. As she was changing the tire, she became aware of some noise in the bushes, followed by a horrible odor. When she turned to look, a huge thing with large green eyes and an eerie greenish glow on one side of its hairy torso stepped from the trees and looked at her. After a few terrifying moments, a passing car began to pull over. As it did, the creature walked back into the woods. That is actually not the one I was talking about.
Okay. Well, that one seems very strange to me with the whole green thing.
Green glowing, right? Is that what
It said greenish glow, an eerie greenish glow on one side of its hairy torso.
Interesting. That's
Help.
definitely not something I've heard before.
The skunk apes have gone radioactive.
Right?
Yeah, gone nuclear.
Yeah.
So that's not the one you wanted to talk about. What's the one you wanted to talk about?
The other one is from 1975. So we'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Sure. So, Alex, now is the time for you to tell us about Dave Shealy's first sighting. You said he was 10 years old?
Yeah. So, well, I want to preface this with Dave Shealy. Dave Shealy is a heck of a guy. Just looking into him. He's the self-proclaimed Jane Goodall of skunk apes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's one of my favorite points about him. But interestingly enough, from what I could tell, I guess his family's lived in the Big Cypress National Preserve like since 1890.
Mm-hmm.
Is when his family settled there in that area. So his whole family's lived and grown up in that area. And he was talking about how when he was at the age of 10, I think it was him and his brother, they were out hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And they were walking around, and off in the distance he smelled something really bad. He talked about you could smell something, and then off in the distance he says he saw the outline of a guy, and then did his brother freak out and like pick him up and just start leaving the area? I think that's what I was reading.
So
it went down a little bit different. Go ahead, Jasmine.
Well, what I read is that, first of all, a few years prior to this sighting that we're about to talk about, his father actually had come upon a set of footprints that were supposedly left by the creature. So Dave Shealy and his family had prior knowledge of the skunk ape legend and it being a possibility. And so they were out hunting. They were hunting deer. His older brother's name is Jack, and they were in the swamp behind their house in Big Cypress. And he's quoted as saying, so this is coming from Dave Shealy. He did an interview with Smithsonian Magazine a few years ago, and this is how he explains the situation. He says, "It was walking across the swamp, and my brother spotted it first, but I couldn't see it over the grass. I wasn't tall enough. My brother picked me up, and I saw it about 100 yards away. We were just kids, but we'd heard about it and knew for sure what we were looking at. It looked like a man, but completely covered with hair." So he and his brother stared at the creature, but almost immediately, I guess it started to rain. And so the creature ran away into the cypress hummocks and scattered amongst the marsh. And so he was like freaking out. He was like, holy crap, like I finally saw this thing. It got away just like that. And so this, the way the Smithsonian Magazine article puts it is, the fleeting moment left an indelible impression on young Sheeley. And Sheeley's now like in his 50s, I think.
Mhm.
And so he has like decades of like idle interest in the creature. It's like not his like main obsession yet. But he decided to get serious about it eventually.
Yes, and it's a little what the event that transpired that got him involved seriously does bear, like, we should talk about that, and I have some
Okay.
pretty good notes on it. So this occurred in 1997, July 21st to be exact, and it involves Ochapi Fire District Chief Vince Doer, who was driving to work through the Big Cypress Natural Preserve when a tall, hairy, reddish-brown thing crossed the road in front of him. It came from the left, which is the east, and then it went across the road. And this is what he told the Miami News reporter Jim Kelly. When it crossed the road, it looked like it was taking kind of long steps. So he immediately ruled out a bear because he had seen those before, and also, like most people know, bears do not walk on two legs.
Sometimes they do, but not
They
usually.
do not. I feel like if it's crossing the road, it's not going to walk on two legs.
No, it's not. But bears can stand on their back 2 feet, and they are known to walk on their back 2 feet.
Yeah. Did you ever see Yogi Bear?
Yeah. Oh, dude, I remember that documentary.
It blew my mind.
Yeah. Hard Knock Life, being a bear, just trying to get picnic baskets, dude.
Yeah.
So he got closer to it as he was driving. He stops his truck and he grabs a camera that was sitting beside him. He always had a camera with him in case he had to document a fire or an accident scene. So he actually took a photo of this creature.
Mhm.
And it's like 400 feet away from him at the point that he takes this photo. And wow, that's interesting. So he actually yelled at it and it stopped and it turned and it looked at him and then started to parallel the road. And that's when he took his photo. And then it just kind of walked away. And so he just got back into his car or his truck, drove to work, didn't tell anyone about it, didn't get his film developed for 10 days because he didn't think much of it. He actually made jokes about it with his friends at work. And then I don't know the exact order of events, but he ended up getting the photos developed, talked to a newspaper, they published the story, and then, lo and behold, more comes out about this fateful day, to where the Everglades Echo newspaper, which is who he did a report with, or who he reported it to, had two sightings from the same day. One was from Jan Brock, who was actually a neighbor of Doer's, who had seen a similar creature on the same road just a few minutes before he had.
Whoa.
She describes it as being 7 feet tall, dark brown hair, lighter colored patch on its chest, which crossed the road in front of her about 1,000 feet away.
And very shaggy.
Very shaggy. And then this is the really crazy part, which is 2 hours later on that same day, 20 tourists in a van on a tour spotted a similar thing 2 miles away from its original sighting location. And by that, I mean, Doer and Jan Brock's sighting on that road. So about 2 miles away. And so they first saw it while they were driving, and they saw it moving from east to west. They didn't know what to make of it. They drove away. That's where it would have stayed until while they were out on a gator walk, walking along the canal or a canal, it emerged from some bushes about 30 yards away from the parked van, and it freaked 3 people out, 2 women and a young girl. It kind of popped out and was like, oh, there's people here, and turned around and walked away.
Mm.
And so that makes 4 sightings on the same day.
That's crazy.
And a photograph.
I hadn't heard about the bus one that you were just talking about. I thought you were actually going to tell a different story about a bunch of people on a bus seeing a skunk ape,
There is another story about that.
because that happens just a couple days earlier. Like, I know we're going kind of backwards in time, which isn't typically how we do things, but there was apparently another sighting in July of 1997. This one apparently happened on July 16th, where Steve Goodbread, he was a guide for Pelican Tours. He was driving a bus with about 30 tourists along Turner River Road in Big Cypress, just east of Ochapi. And he was stopped at a wooden bridge when he observed a large creature standing erect behind some brush approximately 70 yards away. It was about 7 feet tall, thick brown hair covering its entire body. So the creature was rocking back and forth, shaking the bushes, and appeared irritated by their presence. And so him and his passengers watched what they believed to be a skunk ape for about 15 minutes. This part I find a little bit humorous. He apparently tried to persuade one of the tourists who had a telephoto lens on her camera to get off the bus and go take pictures, but she refused to do so. And he did say in retrospect, it was probably a good idea that no one got off the bus so that everybody stayed safe. And he drove away with the creature still in sight. And even though the bus driver had always believed in the possibility that the skunk ape existed, he was shaken by the experience and refused to advertise or exploit the skunk ape with his tours. So busy week or busy month, good old July of 1997.
Yeah. Just to clarify that we are talking about two different things. I noticed you got the name of the tour guide. I too have the name for the tour guide for the incident I was talking about, and it is John Vickers.
Okay.
So it is two different situations, which is actually pretty wild because I didn't know the one you were. I knew about it vaguely, but I didn't know it happened so close in proximity to this one. So so those events of 1997 really spurred Dave Shealy. Whoa, we're coming all back.
I know. We're circling back.
Yeah, it spurred him to kind of take this seriously.
Yeah. And again, we're going backwards again a little bit. So 97 is kind of when Shealy is like, all right, we got to take this seriously. Let's get down to business here. But he did have another experience a couple years earlier in 1977. When he was a teenager, he found some footprints, 4-toed footprints left at a site near his hunting camp deep in Big Cypress. So that happened earlier. Now we're back in 1997. Things are getting down to business. Let's talk about him.
Right. So Shealy, following those events, he vows to search for the skunk ape every day until he sees something. So that's kind of what he does. He starts setting up tree stands in his property. He, at that point in time, I think he owned 30 acres worth of land in the Cypress Natural. Did I say that right? Cypress Natural Preserve?
Yeah, Big Cypress.
Big Cypress. Yeah, Big Cypress. That was the word. Big Cypress, which is where he lives still to this day. And so he sets up tree stands so he can sit up there and look out over the swamp. And then he also sets up baiting areas that he's wanted to bait with. He tried to bait it with lima beans.
He was talking about that in that little documentary.
Yeah.
He supposedly the Sasquatch are fans of legumes of the sort. But he did, in that documentary that Alex was referencing, mention that he doesn't so much do that anymore because it's not good to get an animal off their natural diet. So he uses things more like livers and buckets of blood.
There was a strange adverse effect to where the lima beans and the lagoons took away the smell of the skunk apes.
Then you couldn't smell them anymore.
Yeah, it was
maybe that's what caused the green glow. Too many lima beans. Yeah, could you imagine? Yeah, these lima beans are causing Sasquatch to go bioluminescent.
They're going straight up nuclear. That's why you don't mess with the natural order.
They're going nuclear.
So Sheeley starts his lifelong quest of hunting down the skunk ape, and as far as I've found, his next actual sighting. So, like we said, he saw it for the first time when he was 10. He
Mhm.
found footprints when he was a teenager. His next actual visual sighting, I believe, happened in September of 1998.
Yes. Because he was in one of those tree stands that he
Mhm.
set up,
Mhm.
and he had fallen asleep.
Whoa. What's funny?
Good?
You said it. He finally saw it again on September 1998. Oh, that's funny. Because he was on the Daily Show of June that year talking about the skunk ape.
Oh, really? That's the
Wow.
same year?
Yeah. Little side note. Apparently, there's an episode of the Daily Show from 1998 where they sent Stephen Colbert to talk to Dave Shealy. Because
What?
Stephen Colbert joined the Daily Show in '97 as like a correspondent guy before moving up and getting his own show. But apparently, I couldn't find any taping of it, so I'm putting the call out there to the Cryptid Campfire Nation. If you have a recording of the Daily Show from June 17th, 1998, I'd love to see it. That sounds amazing. But yeah,
Wow.
and interestingly enough, that's Dave Shealy mentions that interview is the reason why one of his long-term girlfriends dumped him after 7 years.
It's true.
Oh, I heard about that. Was that in the video I sent you guys?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, wow, that's savage, dude. That's horrible.
Isn't that wild? But that was my little side note about 1998.
Mhm. So back to Sheely's sighting. Tell us about it, Eli.
Yes. So he fell asleep in a tree stand, and he wakes up to the sound of splashing, as he says, splash, splash, splash. And he looks out and he sees it's walking in the water below him. And you have to remember, this is like swampy, like the water isn't like super high or anything, maybe it's 6 inches, maybe it's a foot tall, so it's walking and it's obviously splashing in the water, and it doesn't seem to be aware that he's up there. So he just kind of keeps quiet, observes it for a little bit, and photographs it. And there's a picture of that, which it looks like a hairy person in tall grass, which looks very reminiscent of his later footage, which we'll get to. But
okay. Could you potentially send me that photo? Because one of the problems that I run into when we do a lot of cryptid research is you will hear about a certain explorer, researcher, cryptozoologist who has an encounter out in the wild, and then the article will say something along the lines of they took a photo or they took a video. But a lot of the times the article doesn't have the photo that it's talking about. It doesn't have the photo for reference. So then you go on Google and you type in so-and-so skunk ape photo, and you have no way of knowing which one is the actual one you're looking for because there's so many different articles. Google searches show you things that come from web pages that have the words you're talking about. So I can see images that aren't Dave Shealy's 1998 photo, but in the article that picture is in, they talk about Dave Shealy's 1998 experience. So basically what I'm trying to say is, unless an article explicitly says, this is the photo so-and-so took on blah blah date, I have no idea what I'm looking at. So I see now that Eli has sent me the photo. I'm going to take a look at it now. Is this from the literal article that I read?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Oh, whatever. Confused. It's fine.
It's been a rough year already.
And I will also say he went back to that location later and casted a track, a concrete track, which is kind of wild because most people don't use concrete to cast tracks, but it's certainly possible.
He also supposedly made a is this what you were just saying? He casted the footprint?
Hmm?
Yeah.
And
which
concrete,
he has
which is pretty
in his
weird.
gift shop.
Yeah, he sells it in his gift shop, which he also sells a field guide. So I will share this. I'm going to Dave Shealy's Skunk Ape headquarters like later this month, like in a matter of days. By the time this recording comes out, I will probably be on my way to Florida.
Yeah, this is
So,
really exciting. I'm
yeah,
actually
it's
very excited.
it's gonna be so sick. So I might meet Dave Shealy, I'm not sure, but I'm gonna be in his Skunk Ape headquarters and I'm going to buy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll bring it back and I'll show it.
Very cool. We'll have to do a little follow up. If we don't do another full episode on it, maybe one of these days you can just like briefly talk about it before we get into it, another episode or something.
Maybe we'll do a interview with Eli.
Yeah, you guys will interview me.
So those are his first 2 sightings. He supposedly has at least 2 more that I heard of, bringing the total to 4.
Yes.
The next one happened in 2000, which is when he filmed the video clip that Eli briefly mentioned a little bit earlier that you may have seen floating around online. I feel like I of course didn't know of it previously to doing any research for this episode because I didn't really know anything about the skunk ape, but I feel like if you have previous knowledge about the skunk ape, you have probably seen this video from Dave Shealy.
Yes. It's about 2 minutes long. It's kind of it's a low quality video.
Mhm.
And I don't think it's because it's not like blurry in the sense that it's like out of focus or anything like that. It's just it's July 2000. The
Yeah.
quality of camera back then, like home cameras, was just not very good.
Yeah,
So
it's a grainy daytime clip shot
and
from hundreds of feet away.
away.
Mhm.
So you have to assume that it's probably zoomed in all the way
Yeah.
to the max.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of like a hairy dude walking around in a field, it looks like, for about a minute and a half, and then it just takes off running for no apparent reason.
Yeah. Some people call it a long-limbed run, but and Shealy claims that at the time that he took this video, the swamp was covered by over a foot of water, which would mean that the animal's speed he estimated to be 22 miles per hour,
Which is pretty fast.
which is impossible for any human to achieve. However, the author of the Smithsonian article, which I've mentioned, claims that it's extremely hard to watch the video and see anything but a guy in a suit hurrying across the swamp.
Well, see, I talked to Carrick about that today, and I just kind of asked him, what do you think of this video? And he was like, it looks like a dude in a suit, but there's also nothing you can definitively point to and say it's a dude in a suit, because it is so low quality. You can't see any seams. There is no way to prove Dave Shealy's claim that there's over a foot of water in that swamp because you can't see it.
Mhm.
You can't see its entire lower half, so if you were going off like the whole patty analysis about the knee bend,
Mhm.
there's no way to verify that because you can't see it. So it's just, I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, it's kind of wild.
But should we bring up, okay, so here's the big, right, there's the controversy, right? It's insinuated that it might be a hoax. And Dave Shealy's background certainly lends itself to him, I wouldn't say necessarily being willing to do a hoax, but like it's kind of, he's got a sus background.
He's a little bit of a character, a little bit of a trickster, it seems.
He's lived a full life.
He's lived a full life, and that involved him in some federal legal troubles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. So maybe we'll just leave it there.
Oh, and we'll pick it up in part 2.
Yeah, we can, but I mean, just to speak a little bit more about why people do question his authenticity outside of, his own personal life. Critics point out that he openly profits from the skunk ape, selling, trinkets and stuff, and offering swamp tours. He applied for a grant in 2000 from the Collier County Tourism Development Council to fund his research, and some remarked upon the conveniently timed release of the skunk ape footage that we've been talking about. And so the skunk ape, which bears a striking resemblance to a guy in a monkey suit, was filmed walking across a clearing, said columnist Brent Batten for Naples Daily News. He said, anyone who previously doubted the existence of the skunk ape should now be converted, the same way that anyone who doubted the existence of flying saucers carrying evil space aliens would have a change of heart after seeing Plan 9 from outer space. So he had a very cynical viewpoint and fully believed that it was, hoaxed. So there's the reasons for questioning aren't that crazy, but at the same time, the commitment that he has to the research and the time that he spends, one of his biggest things is, all these people say it doesn't exist, but I don't see them out here, spending their entire days looking for it or trying to prove that it's fake or anything like that. He's yeah, he has people come out and do documentaries, and yeah, he does news articles and stuff like that, but he's also just doing it on his own. That is what he does with his life. So I don't know.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is people always talk smack about Bigfoot existing out in the woods, especially in the Pacific Northwest, but oh, Bigfoot couldn't be out there, we would have found him already. And little do they know that the forest is so big, and things don't really leave a trace in the forest already. Now you take it to a swamp, the largest untouched land east of the Mississippi, and you're talking about the water flowing in and out. He talks about how he does most of his research in the span of a month, because that's the dry season.
What did he say? I think there's like you said, the span of a month. It's from
March to April.
What is it? March to April? Yeah, March to April.
Yeah,
because
Florida is what, tropical, semi-tropical,
it's tropical
conditions most of the time.
It's talk about finding footprints, right? Much less in the Pacific Northwest, to a place where the ground is completely soft and ever changing. So I'm kind of with him on that. If you haven't been down there and you're just saying it's fake, no.
And then his latest sighting, his most recent, as far as I know, because this article that kind of guided my research for today was written in 2014, so it's possible that Sheeley has had additional sightings since then, but I did not read anything about them. I found that his most recent sighting took place in August of 2011, when he was apparently not even looking for the skunk ape. Surprisingly, he was just out picking some berries, some palmetto berries in the swamp, and he just smelled it all of a sudden. He said, right away, I could smell it, kind of like a wet dog and a skunk mixed together. And then it emerged from behind a palm frond, and it saw him, and then it bolted, just as quick as that.
Yeah.
Proper
no comments on that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll ask if I meet him. I'm gonna ask him, hey, you seen this? Have you seen it 5 times yet?
How many times have you seen the skunk ape?
How many times have you seen it? Yeah.
This is it's not switching gears, because it is still talking about Sheeley, but we've gone through each of his sightings by this point, and he has a little bit of beef with the government authorities and other people. Supposedly he also has beef with Finding Bigfoot, because they came out there and I guess he was on an episode. I don't know, I didn't look up the episode or anything like that, but he claims that the producers apparently balked at the logistical difficulties of traveling into the swamp to investigate a sighting, and asked him to fake it in his backyard instead.
I know firsthand information that I'm not allowed to share on the show, which I can see that being a thing. I could see that happening, and I could see it wouldn't be an issue with Cliff or Bobo or any of the members, any of the cast of the show. It would be
Gotcha.
strictly with
The
the producers.
That makes
Mhm.
sense. Because I wondered, because I read some stuff on Cliff's website, not specifically about Sheeley, but about the skunk ape, and Bobo was involved in some other stuff too later, which we might talk about in the future. But continuing on with the sort of like beef Sheeley has, he claims that park authorities who have declared the animal doesn't exist haven't spent nearly as much time as him in the swamp, which we talked about a little bit earlier. He also has a long-running feud with the government, claiming that the night after he spotted the skunk ape in 1998, he saw a government helicopter hovering above the site for hours on end. And he said that also when he spotted the animal in 2011, he had gathered a sample of hair off a branch where it had been snagged, but an unidentified federal agent, or federal agents, plural, came to his house the next day and confiscated it.
What does the government want with these stinky apes?
I don't know. I wish I could have found more details on that. Eli, when you talk to Sheeley, if you talk to Sheeley, ask him about the government agents, ask him about the men in black.
I will. You know what? I'm gonna put it in my notes.
Take down some notes.
Yeah.
Cryptid Campfire wants to know.
I want to ask you some questions. Yeah, let's see. Dave Shealy questions. So the first one is, how many times?
Which, if you've listened to our podcast before, you know that that's kind of like a running inside joke. How many times have you seen? Or no, no. What you need to ask him is, how many skunk apes have you seen?
Yeah,
that's how we do
skunk
it.
Apes?
Speaking of how many, he claims in 2019. He made the claim that there are precisely 7 to 9 skunk apes currently living in the Everglades.
Oh, I got 12. And I thought it was like 6 to 12 living on his property, like his plot of 30 acres or so.
Well, like I said, that statement that came from CBS Miami, and that was in 2019 that he apparently said that. Do you know when the number you're sharing came from? Like,
Pretty
when
sure
he
it's
said
from the
that number?
Smithsonian Magazine article.
Well, that would have that was 2014. So
yeah,
could have changed.
Could have changed. I'll ask him.
Ask him how many
Well,
skunk apes are
apes.
living in the Everglades.
Yeah, because I was I can't remember. There's 2 documentaries. One I did not send to you guys, but and one that I didn't watch in full, and I can't remember which one it was in, because they were both about Sheeley, but one's like an hour long and a little bit more long-winded, and really only covers his first sighting.
Oh, jeez.
It's like an hour long, and there's like this weird Bigfoot song that's like, oh, we're going down to the swamp, and Dave Shealy's gonna be there, and it's like a whole song in there. Yeah, maybe I should have sent it to you guys. You guys could have. But I think it's in that one that he says that he would have he wants more females to come in so it can increase the gene pool.
Yeah, I think he briefly mentioned that in the one you did send us.
Okay.
Yeah. But so guys, we have talked at length about Dave Shealy on this episode, and unfortunately we did not get to nearly everything that we wanted to talk about today, but we are nearing the sort of like time limit for a standard episode. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this a 2-parter, everybody. So we will be back with more skunk ape information in our next episode. I don't know if it's going to be the very next episode we release. Is it going to be the very next episode we release? Is that
probably?
I don't know. Probably will be.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, tune in. Find out.
It'll be a wild card. It could be a whole nother episode. Mongolian Deathworm comes out next week, and then
Bronze Age back again.
Who knows?
We did not intend, like I said, we didn't intend for this to be a 2-parter, but we don't want to drag it on, and we don't want to just leave out all of the research and all of the fun things we found. So we will continue this in an additional episode, but I think that's where we're going to end it for today. So be sure to come back and hear the rest.
Yeah, make sure you took notes too. There'll be a quiz at the end.
I don't know if there'll be a quiz, but to close this out, we're going to be doing things a little bit differently. So we used to end our episodes by giving our personal sign-offs and our social media and everything like that, and we would verbally list all of our sources. However, we're not going to bore you with that information anymore. We are instead going to ask that you go to our website and visit our blog, where we will have all of the specific and direct links and book titles and articles and everything that we used in our research for you to read in full if you are curious, so that you can go and see that firsthand information that we shared with you. So be sure to visit cryptidcampfire.com. Do that, and you can find out all of the glorious pool of information that we pulled from for this episode.
Maybe there'll be an Easter egg in there too. You never know.
An Easter egg? What's in it?
Chocolate.
Wow. We also want to thank one of our Patreon listeners who's been with us for a very long time, Cosmic Box Turtle. Thanks. Thank you for subscribing, helping us with the show. Stay tuned next week. Maybe your name will get shouted out, only if you're a Patreon supporter.
Yeah, and stick around for just a few extra seconds to hear all of the places you can find us online and how you can learn more about us as individuals.
Adam Zinga.
We want to thank you guys for listening to Cryptid Campfire. We really appreciate it, and we'd appreciate it even more if you left us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It helps us rank, and more people can find us and join the campfire. If you haven't yet, consider following us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. That's at Cryptid Campfire on all three. Be sure to check out our website, cryptidcampfire.com, where you can find campfire t-shirts and other merch, as well as our weekly blog, expanding upon what we talk about in the episodes. If you've done all that, consider subscribing to our Patreon page. $5 a month gets you access to exclusive episodes and wallpapers that haven't been released anywhere else. For the price of a coffee, you will be directly helping us make this show the best it can be. If you want to follow our hosts, you can find their personal profiles on Instagram at Jasmine May With, that's JasmineMaewith, at Alex Daikaiju, that's at AlexDaikaiju, and at the Eli Watson. Thank you, everyone, and see you next week.
This podcast is a part of Straight Up Strange Productions. Discover more shows like this one at straightupstrange.com.